Today I'm going to be making shelf-stable white chicken chili. So I'm gathering up all of the ingredients right here out of my pantry, and I thought that I remembered having some frozen chicken stock in the freezer. So I have 3 containers that I will be taking to the kitchen, and I will be putting this into my chicken chili today. Okay, white chicken chili really does not have a whole lot of ingredients. I suppose standard chili maybe really doesn't either, but it's really quite easy to assemble and really incredible to eat. I live in Ohio, so our cold season feels like it's the absolute longest season. It kind of feels like we have 2 seasons in Ohio. You have summer or you have winter. Having soups and chilies on my shelf is probably on the top of my have to do list more than it would be salsa. Not that we don't and can't enjoy salsa in the winter time, but a good bowl of hot soup or chili on a cold, snowy day, there is just nothing better than that. And this onion, that part does not look good. These are brand new as well. All right, so what I'm going to do as an overall here, I've got some onions I'm gonna get diced up. I have some garlic I'm gonna get diced up. And then I have 3 ears of corn. I have my chicken that is already prepared. I have a chicken tortilla canning video up, so please go check that out. I did all of my chicken cooking that one day. That was, for you it's been quite a bit of time, but for me it was only 3 days ago. So I have my chicken already pre-cooked. I should say par-cooked. It is not cooked thoroughly. And I go into explanation as to why I do that in my chicken tortilla soup. And then I have some jalapenos. We certainly will not be using all of those, but it's just what I have here that I need to use up. Back behind me, I have a can of fire roasted diced green chilies. These are pretty mild. If you saw my pantry tour video, I have my own hatched chilies on the shelf, but they are very hot. I would use that in a recipe like this if I knew I was making, gosh, I don't know, probably double the amount that I'm doing today, so that that spice level can even out a little bit. But I don't want to open that big jar just to use a little bit of it today. And then I have my salsa verde that I have canned up. I'm probably going to go get another jar of this. And then Great Northern beans. These are dried. I'm going to be putting those in every single jar. I'm going to wash them first. But for now, we're gonna get our onions, our garlic, some jalapenos, and our corn chopped and ready to go while the broth behind me does what it needs to do. I don't make these into really tiny pieces because as this cans, it's cooking under pressure anywhere from 90 to 70, anywhere from 75 to 90 minutes. I'm doing both quart and pint jars today. And so when it's cooking that long under pressure, my onions are really gonna soften up and won't, at that point as I'm eating my chili, it won't feel like I have a big chunk of onion. But I do wanna know it's there. I think we're gonna use, we'll start with 4 jalapenos. I'll see how much it makes. I might add more. I used 4 when I made my chicken tortilla soup, and it actually wasn't very spicy, and we like it spicy. So when it goes through the canning process, maybe that mellows it out a little bit. I'm not sure, but I'll taste it before we can it and see what I think. Very well. If I had more corn, I probably would add it, but 3 ears is all I have left after the chicken tortilla soup and just eating it fresh from what I grabbed from the farmer's market the other day. So that's okay, we'll use what we have. You could use frozen as well. You don't have to use fresh, but given the time of year and the fact that it's available to me, I generally will use fresh corn. You probably don't want to use canned corn because it's already been cooked through the canning process and it'll just further break down. So that's up to you. I'm gonna get that cilantro in here, and I'm just gonna really just dump everything in except for my beans. Onions, garlic, and jalapenos are gonna go in. Put my corn in. Gonna open my chilies and get those into the pot. I have 3 of my homemade salsa verdes. I'm gonna start with 2. Oh, smells so good. Salsa verde is really going to lend so much flavor to this. I mean, I'm already adding different components to, of course, amp up the flavor, but the amount of flavor that is just in this one jar is just amazing. I absolutely love that stuff, and I will make sure I have it on my pantry shelf all the time. You want to see what it looks like? Even though my salsa verde has a ton of flavor components in it, I am going to continue adding even more flavor to it. So I'm going to use Mexican oregano. Smushing it while it goes in there. I learned this from somebody else, that Mexican oregano is actually considered like a hot herb. So if you're using this and you're smushing it in your hands, make sure you wash your hands really well, because if you go to rub your eyes, it's going to burn. Now that's likely going to happen with most anything that's on your hands, but this will, it'll kind of remind you as if you just maybe chopped a jalapeno or something like. So definitely make sure you wash your hands after you use it. This definitely carries a different flavor component than your typical oregano. If you don't have Mexican oregano, then just skip it, don't add it. I don't know that the other flavor of the other oregano that we're used to, I don't know that that's gonna give you that flavor that you're looking for. I don't know that I can make anything without adding more onion of whatever sorts. So I've got, of course, the chopped onions in there, and I'm gonna add some onion powder. And then, of course, a little garlic powder. And cumin. I'm not measuring. I just let the Holy Spirit guide me with this. Just, you know, whatever feels right. I'll taste it and I can adjust it later. I definitely go on the lighter end. I don't want to overpower anything, but this is going to make a lot. So I want to make sure it's nice and flavorful. It's a chili, so I do want it to be thick. However, because I'm cooking the beans in the canner, I'm going to make it a little bit thinner of a broth than I typically would if I was just cooking it on the stovetop. So I'm gonna add some water to here. 4 cups. So while I'm waiting on that broth to come to a simmer, I cleaned up my mess and I've got some jars here in the sink. This morning I unloaded my dishwasher and I had all of those jars in there. So since those are washed and sanitized already, I have those set to the side, and I brought up the number of jars that I was missing to make a full batch. So the 2 different type of canners that I have this canner, which I can process both pints and quarts in. And then same with this canner, of course you can process pints and quarts. However, when I'm doing a really big batch like this, I always do my pints in here because I can double stack them. And when I decide I need to do both pints and quarts, I will put then my quarts in here. So I can fit 7 quart jars and I can fit 18 pints when I double stack. So I needed to make sure whatever I didn't have already out of the washer machine that I brought up from the basement where now I have to wash and sanitize those because they were just sitting in storage. Once they come out of the washing machine, of course, they're clean. They go to my basement for storage, clean, but they do collect dust down there, and so I just give them a really good hand wash again if I didn't run a cycle for the washing machine. So that's what I'm gonna do now. This is almost ready to taste test to see if I need to add anything different. And then I'll go ahead and throw the chicken in there. I don't want the chicken to cook too much more because I want to make sure I have a really tender chicken at the end of the canning process. And chicken breast, in my opinion, if you cook it too long before it goes into a jar, to me it kind of tastes a little dry. So but I need it warmed through anyhow before I put them in my jars. So we'll be back. Right now, what you watched me do is I was just prepping the area that I'm going to be working in. So I have my jars filled in the canner behind me. Those are coming up to temperature. They're going to be at a simmer. I'm probably going to let it go for about another 10 more minutes, and then I'll check and make sure those jars are nice and hot. This is definitely nice and hot in here. I've checked on it. I actually had to lower the temperature. I had to lower the temperature a little bit. Hot. I don't want anything to scorch at the bottom. And I'm going to give it a good stir, break up some of that chicken that wanted to stick together. That's definitely looking good to go. I have my beans here that I have rinsed and sorted through. I'm using white Great Northern beans for my white chicken chili. You can use whatever bean you prefer. The type of bean you use has no effect on processing time, so use what you like. I have a bowl of vinegar so I can wipe the rims, and then I have my reusable washcloths here ready to go. I have my funnel, my debubbler, and I always have a separate jar or measuring cup on the side so that way as I'm filling jars I have a clean sanitized spot to place my items. And my mat can get pretty dirty at times while I'm filling, so I don't want to rest it on here. And then I had, from my prior canning session, I had some of my lids washed and put up already for me, but then I had to open up new packages of lids, and as you saw, I gave those a wash. Just because they come in a box or they come wrapped in plastic, I still recommend that you give them a good wash. Remember, we are trying to make food shelf stable, so everything needs to be washed and sanitized. Your hands need to be cleaned. Anything that is dealing with the jar itself, the food in it, and whatever's on top of it, and anything that touches the food in the process needs to be cleaned. I know there are people who go straight from the box to the top of their jars, and that's their kitchen, their rules. They're allowed to do what they want. I just recommend you give them a wash. You don't know how many hands have been on them. The ball canning lids actually are in a box, and I happen to know from working in warehouses in the past, there are mice that run around, and you never know what's been around those. So I just take that extra step of precaution, especially because I do gift a lot of my jars to people, and I want them to know that, you know, I practice safe and clean canning practices. And then I have my rings here ready. These are always washed right after I'm done with my canning process. I'll wash my jars, I'll wash my rings, and I go and store them. Very hot jar, very hot product. I'm actually going to add my beans first, and I'm going to get my 1/4 cup measure here. Now it is chili, so I do want it to have quite a bit of beans, so I'm going to do a 1/2 cup for the quart jars. Something to keep in mind when you are canning beans: they will swell during the cooking process. They will get bigger. So it may not seem like there's a lot in there, but you really don't want it to absorb all of the liquid that you have in here. So there is a fine line between the ratio of bean to the product that you have in here. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to write down in my canning notebook everything that I've done today. If I feel like I could have added more beans the next time, I will make that notation once I bring them out of the canner. I open one to eat it. I might say, you know what, there's quite a bit of liquid still left in here. I could have added more beans. So I'll just make that notation, but I'm gonna just err on the side of caution today and do what I usually do for any other type of a soup. I know this isn't technically soup, it's chili. But because I have the dry beans in here, I'm going to treat it like it's a soup. So I'm going to fill my jar halfway with my solids, the vegetables, beans, and meat. And then I will do the other half with my broth, because I know some of that broth is going to be reduced because of the beans. So I will still treat it, in this particular case, like it's a soup. I'm going to debubble, and I will check to see if my headspace needs adjusted. And we are good. So I'm going to get my rag, dip it in my vinegar, and I'm going to wipe my rim of my jar. You do not want any food or grease to settle on top of that rim. You don't want any spices that you might be using. You want it nice and clean. Just the smallest particle of cilantro will interfere with your lid sealing. Get our lid on. The ring fingertip tight, and we're gonna go switch it out. It looks so good. Oh, I can't wait. So here's the quart jars, and I'm gonna say it may not look like much, but I promise you it's going to taste amazing. This jar has already sealed, and it looks like there's gonna be a good amount of liquid once it's all come down and cooled. The beans definitely plumped up beautifully. You can see that those are very well plumped and cooked in there, so I think I'm satisfied with the amount of beans that I put in there. But time will tell once I open a jar and I'm eating through it. In terms of the amount of space that's still left, I definitely did a good job. Now it did look like there's maybe a little bit of siphoning, not a whole lot. When you have water in the canner, it doesn't take a whole lot. Like if you imagine lightly pricking yourself and a drop of blood go down into water, it kind of makes it look worse than it is. And so the little bit of haze that I have in the canner tells me there was maybe just a little bit of siphoning. My jars don't seem very dirty, so it wasn't too bad. And so you might notice that there is some liquid loss. That of course could be due to siphoning, or in this case what's likely happening is the same reason why I wanted to make sure I had plenty of liquid in there is because my beans absorbed some of the liquid that's in there. There we have it. I have 7 quarts, and how many did I say? 12 pints. Shelf-stable white chicken chili. Green verde chicken chili maybe. Nonetheless, it's gonna go on my shelf tomorrow. When I wake up in the morning or even come home from work, depending on where in the day I have time, I will take the rings off of these. I will test my seals. I'm gonna wash my jars, wash my rings, label everything, and it's going straight into my pantry. So I thank you for coming along with me today. We had a lot of fun, and I hope you give this recipe a try, even if it's just for your stovetop. You won't regret it. I hope to see you next time.